$7,580. If you're a couple retiring in Canada, that's the amount that you're likely to get every single month for doing nothing. But isn't that too good to be true? Well, it probably is, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about in today's video. So let's get started. If you are new to this channel, my name is Navjot and I want to retire 1 million immigrants with $5 million. And if you are someone who wants to join this mission, all you need to do is subscribe to the channel, and I promise that I'll make amazing content that will make you and me a lot of money. So in today's video, we'll be talking about CPP, which is Canada Pension Plan, and OAS, which is Old Age Security. Now, if you are someone who have ever received a paycheck in Canada, you would know that you are actually contributing towards a CPP, but we'll talk about not just CPP, but also about OAS and how that works. So first we'll talk about obviously how much do you get paid and when. Second, we'll talk about will it be enough when you retire, because there is inflation, and $7,580 or whatever that number eventually is as an immigrant, it could be very different for you, and we'll talk about that. And thirdly, we'll be also talking about what happens if you decide to retire abroad, for instance in India. Would you still receive the OAS and CPP? Will you still receive all the retirement benefits? And if yes, then are there any tax implications on that? We'll talk about that as well in the end. But first, let's talk about CPP, which is Canada Pension Plan. The maximum amount, if you're retiring today at the age of 65, let's assume that I was 65 today and I was retiring today, the maximum amount that I can receive is just under $1,365. This is just one person. If my wife is also retiring, then she'll also receive this amount at 65. Eligibility is simple. You have to be at least 60 years old. So that's a prerequisite. So you can actually start withdrawing or start taking the CPP when you turn 60. And you have made at least one valid contribution in your CPP. Now, if you have only made one contribution, then your CPP will be low. It will not be 1364, anywhere close to that. But the eligibility is that you have to have at least one contribution towards CPP. And most of us, who are watching this video, they have already done that. When can you start? There are 3 ages that you can start. You can actually start as early as 60, and you can actually defer it to as much as 70. If you start in the middle, 65, you will get $1,365 a month. This is as of today. There's no inflation. There's nothing as of today. If you are retiring today at 65, you will get $1,365. If you retire early, you lose 0.6% per month. So you actually get 36% less, which is close to $873 every single month. But if you defer this to 70, this particular amount compounds to $1,937 per month. So you add 0.7% per month, and you add a total of 42% more every single month. So the later you retire, and you cannot withdraw this, you have to withdraw this after 70. So you have to take this benefit after 70. But if the more you, wait, the more money you get every single month. The earlier you take it, the less money you take. The sweet spot, which most people do, is 65, which is kind of the official retirement age, for most people, especially in government service. Now that we understand how the maximum amount works, we also need to understand how much do you actually get. How does that calculation work? Now, it's different for different people, but it depends on your contribution. The average CPP at 65 is not $1,365. It's in fact $815 per month. So how does it work? Now, first, let's understand how the contribution works towards CPP. So let's assume that you have an annual income of $100,000 per year. The first $3,500 of this $100,000 has zero contribution. So you are not contributing anything through your paycheck for the first $3,500. For the next $65,000, so up to a salary of $68,500. So $3,500, there's nothing. The next $65,000 is 5.95%. That's what, it gets deducted from your paycheck. So that's about $3,867. And for the next $4,700, and this is something that only started this year, this is called the Tier 2. I think that's what it's called, Tier 2 of CPP. You deduct or you contribute another 4%. Now, if your salary is, let's say, less than $68,500, you don't have to do this 4%. But if your salary is more than $68,500, you have to contribute another $188 every single year. So the overall max contribution, if you are making, let's say, $100,000, will be about $4,055, and this is times 2 because your employer is contributing the same amount towards your CPP as well. Now, if you are someone who is making over $68,500, you might think that you will get the entire $1,365. However, there's a small catch. And the catch is that you must do it for 39 years. So you have to contribute this amount for 39 years to get the max amount of $1,365 at the age of 65. Now, for instance, I was 32 when I came to Canada. If I work for 39 years, I'll contribute for 39 years, I'll already be 71. By the age of 60, I would have only contributed for 28 years and therefore I'll not get the 1365. And that's the reason why I wanted to make this video for immigrants, because most immigrants actually come in their early 30s. It would probably not be possible for most people, including me, to contribute for 39 years and therefore take the maximum amount, which is 1365 as of today. Now, if you are someone who wants to know how much you will exactly qualify for, you can actually go to My Service Canada account and you can open an account here. If you already have an account here, you can just log in there and you will get more information there. But I hope I was able to clarify that it's unless you came in your 20s and you have been contributing towards the CPP and you have been making the max contribution every single year, that basically means that you have been earning 68,500 and above, and you do that for 39 years, only then you'll get the $1,365. And that's the reason why the average at 65, average across everyone who is taking a CPP right now, it's not $1,365, but it's $815. Regardless of that, you will still get about 75 to 80% of the CPP amount, so it's not a bad thing, but it gets better. Because the thing is that you are not retiring today. You're probably going to retire in 30 years from now. I'm 37 right now. Let's assume that you're 35. And if you retire with the max amount of contribution, you'll get $1,365, but you are not retiring today. And in 30 years, by 2054, when you actually retire, CPP actually accounts for inflation. Let's assume that inflation that we count is 2%. And you can actually do a different calculation. I'll actually give you a calculator down below, and you can actually take a 1.5, 1.2, 1.8, whatever number you want to take. If you want to take a 3%, that's also good. But let's assume that there will be a 2% adjustment to CPP every single year. And the CPP will actually not be 1365, but it will be 2472. It's just adjusted to inflation, so it doesn't mean that 2472 will be worth 2472 at that time. It will still be worth about 1365 or what 1365 can buy. But the overall amount that you are likely to get is closer to 2472, and this is the max amount. Let's assume because we are immigrants and we came in our early 30s, you only receive 75% of that because that's your contribution. You have not contributed for 39 years like I explained in the last slide. You will still get about $1,854, and that's only one person. If you are two people retiring at 65, you're likely to get double the amount. Not a bad thing. And I understand this is 30 years from now, but it's still not a small amount. Now that we understand CPP, let's also try and understand what OAS is, and it's a lot simpler than CPP. The max amount at the age of 65, and you cannot take it before 65. This is something that you have to take at 65 or at 70. That's the range that you can take it at. The max amount right now, if you're 65 today, the max amount that you'll be eligible for is $728 per month. And the eligibility here is slightly different. You have to be at least 65 years old, like I said before, have resided in Canada for at least 10 years since the age of 18. So you can't just reside in Canada for 5 years and go back and then expect an OAS. You will not get that. Income does not matter with OAS, because with CPP, it depends on your income, your contribution, all that does not matter. The only thing your old age security will depend on is the amount of time that you have spent in Canada. If you have spent 40 years in Canada after the age of 18, only then you will be eligible for the $728 per month, but there are certain contingencies to it. The first one is if you are between the age of 65 to 74, you will get the full amount provided you have lived in Canada for 40 years after the age of 18, and your annual income at that time between 65 to 74, when you are in that range, it should be less than $148,451. That's contingency number one. If you're 75 years and over, you can actually get more money, which is $800 and change, but then your annual income should be less than $154,000, and this income range actually includes your CPP and OAS. So it does not exclude that. This is including CPP and OAS. Now, if you've seen my video on retirement planning, and if you are someone who wants to retire with $5 million, there's a very high chance if you stick to that plan, you will be making more than this money, excluding CPP and OAS. And that's why there's a very high chance that, at least for me, I'll not be making anything on my OAS purely because I'll probably be making more than that in my passive income. But that is something for the future. It's just planning. I don't know that. But if you are someone who's making below this amount, and if you have stayed in Canada for 40 years after the age of 18, these are the maximum amounts that you can, make depending on the age that you have. Now let's talk about how much will you actually get when you retire. I'll take a few contingencies. There's something called as a clawback as well. I'll talk about that in a bit because there are thresholds, and they can claw back a little bit of OAS if you're making above a certain income. Obviously, if you're making above the 148, 152, then you get nothing. But if you are even making above $100,000, there's a chance that there'll be clawback that will be there on the OAS. That's why I say that it is a little bit too good to be true. It's still free money, nothing, denying that. But yeah, it's not the maximum amount for everyone. Anyways, let's talk about this. Let's assume my example where I came to Canada at 32 and I retired at 65. So it's not 40 years. I'm retiring at 65. I came at 32. It's 33 years. We'll talk about that, what it translates into in dollar terms. Let's assume that I have an annual income of $100,000. This includes the CPP and OAS, by the way. So if I have an income, like annual income of $100,000, this is all pre-tax income. If I had lived in Canada for 40 years, after the age of 18, I'll get the $728 per month. However, there are certain deductions here. Obviously, like in CPP, if you put 2% inflation adjustment to this, in 30 years, let's say today is 2024, in 2054, I retire at the age of 65, I'll not receive 728, I'll actually receive an adjusted number, inflation adjusted number of 1318. But I did not live in Canada for 40 years after the age of 18. I only lived for 33 years, which is basically 65 divided minus 33. So it comes to about $600 per month. It's a prorated number, 33 divided by 40 multiplied by 728. It comes to $600 per month. Inflation adjusted, it will be just under $1,100 per month. Now I talked about a clawback, and that's where things get a little bit complicated. If you are someone who is making above this threshold of $90,997, in my case, I am making over $100,000, there will be a different calculation for the OAS. And there will be a certain amount that you will have to give back. That certain amount is calculated very simply, annual income minus threshold. So that's 100,000 minus 90,997, which comes to just over $9,000. And there will be a 15% recovery tax on this particular amount. So 15% of $9,000, that comes to $1,350 every single year, divided by 12 will be $112 per month. And that actually brings my OAS down from $600, which was here because I had lived in Canada for 33 years, minus $112 to $488 per month. That's how the recovery tax works. That's how the clawback works. So I'm not getting the 728. I'm only getting the 488, and obviously it will be adjusted to inflation. Let's assume again a 2% inflation. It could be more, it could be less. You can decide for that. I'm taking 2% because that's what the government looks at, and I'll get about $884 in the next 30 years if I retire at 65. So summarizing the CPP and OAS here, if I am maxing out everything, the max at 65 will be 1365. In 30 years, inflation adjusted, it will be 2472. OAS will be 728 max today. 30 years from now, when I retire, it will be 1318. Again, 2% inflation numbers. So overall, I stand to gain about $3790 every single month. This is the maximum that anyone will get. Again, it's adjusted to inflation 2%. And if you are two people retiring, me and my wife retiring at 65, we stand to gain over $7,500. But that's not what I get, at least. I don't know about you. You can do your own calculations. I explained how the calculations work, but I actually am getting a lot less. I am standing to gain not $37.90, but $27.38, $1,000 less because of the calculations that we did. And my number would be almost $2,000 less for me and my wife compared to the maximum that I'll be eligible for at the time of retiring, let's say in 2054. And honestly, that's not a small amount because that amounts to my annual household income pre-tax of $65,000. I know it's 30 years from now. I know it'll be worth a lot less at that time, but it's still money that I did not account for in my $5 million retirement plan. The big question is, will this amount be enough to retire in Canada? And the answer is plain and simple, no. Alright, so this is a calculator that you can actually go to my website, govindnair.com. You can go to Money Tools and download this particular calculator. There are many tabs in this. I'll go to the retirement planning tab and I'll input a few numbers here. You can do this for yourself. I explained that in the $5 million calculator as well, but let's do the calculation and why I say that this number, the $65,000 that you're getting in oldest security and CPP will not be enough when we retire in 30 years. Now these numbers I've inputted assuming that I'm actually retiring today. And these are as per the today, the buying power today, and then we'll extrapolate this with a 3% inflation number. I just want to be conservative, 3% inflation number, and we'll extrapolate this 30 years from now and how much money we'll require based on our expenses today in 30 years. Let's go here, 35, 65, you can just input these numbers. Everything in yellow is actually editable. In fact, everything is editable. It's just that I'll recommend you only edit the numbers in yellow because otherwise the numbers will just move around a lot. Anyways, so in 30 years, I would not want to be, living on rent. I already own a home. I want to, pay off that home in 20 years. I explained that how in my previous video, but I'll not have any mortgage when I retire. So this expense will be $0 for me. If you are someone who will have a mortgage, just write or a rent at this time, just input the $2,500 and your retirement number will change accordingly. I would not personally have a mortgage. That's the hope and that's the plan at least. The home utilities right now, and these are numbers right now, my home utilities are close to $250. My property taxes are $550. My home maintenance is about $200. I would not have a car payment. I do have a car payment right now, but I'll pay off my car and I'll have a cash car when I retire. I do not want to have a mortgage on or any debt there. So that's $0. Car insurance is $180. This is again today's price. Obviously, it will be extrapolated with inflation. And we'll talk about that in a bit. The gas is about $250 that I spend right now. It's actually less than that, but let's take $250. Grocery is about $800. My parents live with me, so grocery is a little bit higher. Childcare expenses, even though if you have children, I'm hoping that in 30 years, they'll not be living with you and you'll not be responsible for them. So irrespective of whether you are planning to have kids or you already have kids or you don't have kids, it doesn't matter because at that time, childcare expenses will probably be zero. I'm hoping that's zero. The phone bill is $115, $500 of eating out, that's about $100, $120 per month. Shopping and fun, let's say another $500. We love to travel, me and Simran, so we would love to travel even when we are 60, 65. So we really want to budget about $1,000 per month for travel. That's $12,000 per year. Not crazy amount, and we want to make at least 2 travels, every single year. And other miscellaneous medical expenses, we are old, $500 I've just budgeted for miscellaneous. And you will see that these are not crazy expenses. These are just normal expenses. Most of us will actually have more than these expenses even right now. But let's assume that these were your expenses and you, in order to live a good life, you will need a net, income after taxes of about just under $4,900. But in order to afford the same lifestyle in $4,800 today, you'll actually need $11,400 to afford the same lifestyle that we have today 30 years from now. So we need to account for that. If you multiply it by 12, the yearly after-tax income would be $137,000. And if you are in a 33% tax bracket, I've taken a little bit higher. We don't know what the tax rates will be. But let's assume a 33% tax rate. You will have $207,000 of pre-tax money every single year that you will have to make, and in most cases this has to be passive because at 65 I'm hoping that you are still not working. CPP and OAS will only cover for at max $65,000, at least in my case, and your case will be slightly different. Even if you are making the max amount, it will be close to $80,000-$90,000, but it will not be more than that. So to answer this question again, no, CPP and OAS can never be enough, especially in 30 years from now, to maintain the lifestyle that you currently have. So how does my retirement plan look like? And then we'll see how it changes if I include the CPP and OAS, because I have not counted that. It's just extra money that I'll probably travel more. So I'm not counting this in my retirement plan. But my retirement plan right now, like I discussed in my $5 million video as well, is that I want to pay off my primary home in 20 years. I already am living in my forever home. I'll pay off $15,000 on my birthday every single year so that I'm mortgage free in 20 years, which will be well before 60. I am investing $2,500 every single month for the next 25 years. I'll have a portfolio of almost $3 million by doing this because it's compound interest and it will compound to about $3 million at 8% year on year. Some years will be less, some years will be more, but it's 25 years, so I have ample time. And the income, how I have drawn this is I taken 4% of this lump sum amount. So let's assume that this $3 million that I have in the account, this grows to more than 4%. The $3 million that I have in my portfolio, I draw 4% every single year, and I only adjust to inflation every single year. 4% of $3 million is just under $120,000. That's where the $117,000 number comes from. And if this portfolio grows by more than 4% every single year, theoretically, I'll never run out of this $3 million because the $3 million grows at, let's say, 7 to 8%, and I only draw half of that, which is 4%, and therefore I will never, this $3 million will keep growing, and that's how compounding would work. Some years will be less, some years will be more. That's why I said theoretically, but that's the plan. The third plan that I have is I'll also want to have mortgage-free 2 cash flow properties that give me a cash flow of $5,000 per month. So $5,000 per month per property. Now you might ask, oh, how will you get $5,000 per month? Again, inflation, the rents will increase. I don't intend to have any investment properties in Ontario because there's rent control. So I want to do it in US. I want to do it in Calgary where there is no rent control. And if there's rent control that comes into Calgary, I'll invest everything in the US. But all you need is 2 cash flowing properties that in 30 years can give you $5,000 per month per property after expenses. Even though you don't have a mortgage, and I said these should be mortgage free in 30 years, even though you don't have a mortgage, you still have expenses, you still have property taxes. So make sure that you're accounting for that. And I've given all these details in my video of $5 million retirement where I detailed out how I achieved these numbers. I will link that in the description. You can go through that as well if you have not already. The income from these properties will be $120,000 per month. $5,000 multiplied by 12, $60,000 multiplied by 2 properties comes to $120,000 per month. And that's how I'll achieve the $207,000 that I talked about in my Excel. It will be close to more than that before tax. And of course, I'll be paying taxes and I'll be able to afford the same lifestyle that I have today. And of course, the prerequisite to that is I have to be mortgage free. So all these 3 make up my retirement plan. How does it change if I am getting CPP and OAS? The only difference is this remains the same. I still have to be mortgage free. I can't, sustain my retirement without being mortgage free. Stock market investment remains the same. I want to stay diversified. I will be getting CPP and OAS benefits into 2. My wife will also get it. So that will be $65,000, a year. And the real estate, instead of 2 cash flow properties, I can actually get rid of 1 and only have 1 cash flow property instead of 2 because it requires down payment. It requires, some management as well. I can actually have 1 cash flow property giving me $5,000 per month instead of 2 and have this $60,000 per year income. So the CPP and OAS, if you're contributing towards your CPP and you'll get OAS, even if you do not get the full extent of it, you will be able to replace the income from 1 additional cash flow property that you required in your retirement plan. At least that's the numbers that I get for my retirement. Now, it is extremely difficult for me to know each one of you and know what these numbers are, but I'm hoping that you at least got some guidance from here and you can do your own calculations and understand how CPP and OAS drives into your overall retirement plan. Now, what happens if you retire abroad? What happens if you go back to India? It's very simple. I only have 1 slide on this. You will still get your eligible CPP. It's not like you'll not. I don't know why people say that, oh, if you retire, if you go back to India, you'll not get CPP. That's not true. You will still get your CPP because you contributed to it. In fact, even OAS, if you have lived in Canada for at least 20 years after the age of 18, you will still get your OAS amount. If you have lived for less, you'll not get the OAS amount. It's as simple. However, there will be a withholding tax of 15 to 25%. Because OAS and CPP have a tax implication, even if you are in Canada, you will still have to pay taxes on that income because it's your personal income. There will be a withholding tax of 15 to 25%, and you must file taxes in Canada every single year, even if you are living outside of Canada, if you have to get the CPP and OAS. Now, the withholding tax of 15 to 25%, I know it's a very big range, and you will get the tax back if you are, if the tax bracket is not that high. there are certain countries, and unfortunately India is not part of those countries, where the withholding tax is only 15%. There are countries like Argentina, Mexico. There are many other countries. I think there are about 20 countries. I'll link the list of countries in the description. You can just check that. But if you are someone who wants to retire in India, unfortunately India is not one of those countries. There will be a withholding tax of up to 25%, and then you will have to claim it back when you file your taxes in Canada. You need to talk to your CPA before making any big moves. If you are leaving Canada before that, if you are wondering, what will be your CPP, if you are already 60 and if you are thinking of all these things, make sure before you make any big moves to another country, you need to talk to a CPA to understand what the implications will be for you. That's all I have for today. This was like an immigrant special of CPP and OAS. I hope you liked this video. If you did, do hit the like button and share it with a friend. मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए bye bye.